and action. Welcome, everybody. This is PnP Weekly, episode 208. It is 28th of April. We are recording this on Friday, typically on Monday, actually. Now, in this case, again on Friday, because next week is the Microsoft 365 conference. So when you're watching this, if you're watching this on the day when this is getting released or listening, it's Las Vegas. Actually, the keynote is happening today when this is getting released with Jeff Teeper, with some really cool new announcements from Microsoft 365 conference. In the PnP Weekly. Sorry. My name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm the principal product manager in Microsoft 365 with me as a co-host.
The product manager.
The product manager of Microsoft 365. Wait, what? There's quite a few of us, so yes. It's not about the individuals. Waldek.
Yes, hi everybody. My name is Waldek Mastykarz and I am cloud developer advocate for Microsoft 365 at Microsoft.
Excellent. In PnP Weekly, we always talk about the latest on Microsoft 365 and related technologies because it's all part of the Microsoft Cloud. And we typically have a visitor. So today we have
Rousset, yes, from DevDev. He is one of the PMs on Teams Toolkit, and we talked to him about his work journey, where he came from, what he used to do in the past. Did you know that he used to code on Atari? Well, he didn't. So we talked about many cool things, where he came, what he's working on now, and where you will be able to see him in the next few weeks. So without further ado, how about we jump to the interview?
Let's do that. Awesome. Excellent. Thank you, David, for joining us on the PnP Weekly. Really cool to have you on the show. Before we started recording, actually, there was a lot of, let's say, shared experiences related on past. But let's start with the basics. Who are you, and what do you do for a living?
Okay, so I'm David. I'm based in France, in the south of Paris. I'm an old Microsoftie, meaning that I've been working for Microsoft for 23 years. So yeah, I'm a baby Microsoftie too. Like, no, I start to look old, so maybe you can see that I've been working in the industry for a long time. And today I am a PM, a program manager, or product owner. Even now we change the title. I am in charge of the end-to-end developer experience of building apps for Microsoft Teams, and more specifically working in my team on the Microsoft Teams Toolkit.
Yeah. Now I have to go back on 23 years. That's a long time. How did you? That's long time ago. 23 years. That's 2000.
So
wow.
This time,
yeah.
no.
Waldek wasn't. You were unborn, Waldek, I guess. No.
Correct. I was. Yes.
He's 22.
Yes. No, don't feel like it.
So how did you join Microsoft? What was the role, and how did you end up working in Microsoft?
It was a complete random. I know some of my friends when I started. It was in 2000. They were huge fanboy of Microsoft. It wasn't my case because I've never been a fanboy of technology. For me, I've been a developer since I'm very young. I started writing basics at 8 on the computer of my father. It was an Atari 800 XL, a very old computer. And for me, being a developer, I love coding, I love technology. So I'm not religious about technology, but I was looking for a job, and I went on the forum when you're looking for a job, and there was a Microsoft booth, and I said I'm looking for a job, and he said, no, you're too young, and we are not interested, and blah blah blah. I say, okay, yeah, why not? I'm going to give you my resume in case of, and the HR girl read the resume and. Oh, you've been doing some Microsoft action. I done like one IT mission in my life. It was a 6 months contract. I'm a bit ashamed by that because as a developer, you try to hide that, but I put it on my resume. And she said Microsoft Exchange 5.5, this was a nightmare at that time to deploy and maintain. Nobody knew about that. She said, how did you manage to convince the company to do that? Well, because it turned out it was the best solution in our case. Okay, so we have a program to hire young people. You should come, and I started, as a support engineer. So writing code for what we call premier accounts.
PFE.
It was
PFE.
before PFE. PFE wasn't
Yes, true.
I'm old.
True.
Just remind that about Waldek. I'm old. PFE wasn't too stuff at that time. So basically, support engineer.
I'm trying to get the bearings,
And I did that for 7 years. I really enjoy it because at that time you were able to support customers, but also we were writing docs because when everybody had the same issue, we were writing kind of an article or documentation. So we were allowed to have half of our time supporting customers and half of the time writing documentation, writing sample codes.
Were any of your docs burned on a CD or DVD that we shipped to customers?
Yeah, we were sending.
Is that what we used to do back then?
Yeah,
right?
we were sending the MSDN with a huge book full of CDs. And then when you have to patch something, at that time, you cannot patch. It's like
you send another one.
So this is how old I am. So not floppy disk, almost floppy disk. And then 7 years of a support engineer. So then I started to help ISVs as a consultant, more or less, for a couple of years. I can't remember. My dream was to become what was named evangelist, which is now named more or less a cloud developer advocate. Yeah. So I was the first evangelist on cloud. I remember my boss told me, like, you're going to be an evangelist on cloud. And I told him, like, but what is cloud? He told me, well, nobody knows, but apparently this is the future of Microsoft.
Yeah. Oh, I recall it. I recall the first time I heard about Azure, and it was back then Windows.
Exactly.
Azure, and it's like so. It's like OS, but it's not a full OS, but it's OS, and you're like,
it's a what?
What is it exactly? It was almost impossible to grow like. So do I get to this point? No, because it's managed in a cloud. So yeah, but how does that? But I think
the challenge with Windows Azure was that it was way ahead of its time because we started with the platform as a service, not as a infrastructure as a service, and therefore customers were like, "Hey, what?" Because they were still having all of the computers and servers on site.
Exactly. And as a developer, I love that. One of my friends came back as it wasn't named Bill at the time; it was named PDC, I guess.
PDC,
And he went there. I think it was in Los Angeles or something like that. And it was Windows Azure and SQL Azure also, and it was platform as a service. And like you said, it was way ahead of its time because as a dev, I was like, man, this is the future. I don't have to worry anymore about the, about the IT. And the IT people in the room didn't like that at all. They said like, no, this is way too soon. But it was fun. And I was doing some Silverlight too. So I was a Silverlight evangelist. Then I switched to HTML5 and web development. I've done a little bit of SharePoint. I've always been curious about technology, meaning that I've done WPF client side. I've done a little bit of backend ASP.NET. Now I'm almost full JavaScript. And I've joined Corp 8 years ago as a remote employee. So we have a specific term at Microsoft. I'm considered as a RGE, meaning I'm a remote guest employee, meaning that I've got a French contract in my case, but my manager is in the US. So all my team is in the US, and the engineering team is in China. So I'm really the bridge. I'm considering myself the bridge, between Asia and US.
And you're in France, being like if you go from China west, like you are directly in the middle.
Yeah, exactly.
And one of the challenges, I did this for a few years, mentoring a team in China because we had a new team established in China, and Europe is in a suitable time zone with China. But US isn't at all. It's like completely out of the normal working hours, and that's why we Europeans quite often get to be the bridge, which makes perfect sense.
Exactly. Otherwise, someone has to suffer, and it should be like kind of a rotation. So today it will be US, China, and you're right, Vesa. My mornings are calls with Asia, basically, and my nights are for with the US. And sometimes my mornings are with some cool Europeans still around, like you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, like on our end, like we have a team that spans from Hawaii to Australia. So like having everybody on a call is just impossible unless somebody pulls indeed the short straw.
Yeah.
But it's exactly that, taking turns, like who's going to have it late in the night, because there's just physically no other way.
Now related on actually that one, I still want to get back on a few historical questions, but related on that particular point, how do you, David, actually deal with that time zone and the working hours is different than everything else? Of course the company isn't directly requiring you to do outside of office hour work, but you do, and then that's kind of, how do you deal with that complexity of time zones and working?
I'm not dealing with it. I'm not dealing with it. No, I guess you need to be. I have often discussion with my manager, Pierce. Pierce is really great, my manager, because he is himself remote. He's based in Utah, so he's in the US. I would say it's easier to be remote in the US because even for American people, if you're not at Seattle or Redmond itself, you're remote. But if you're in the US, like on the East Coast, you only have 3 hours time zone difference. Yep. And this is still the same culture, also the same language. So because on top of that, in our case, we need to manage also the cultural differences and the language barrier also in our case, with my beautiful French accent. So what I'm trying to do is
we can't hear.
Yeah, really. It's a new AI plugin in Teams. Like, can you make it American accent for me, please?
Well, actually, no. Actually, I bet that at some point Americans want to make it French because it's sophisticated.
That's true. Absolutely.
Yeah, we are sophisticated and arrogant at the same time. We have the same reputation.
Confident, David.
Confident. Sorry. Thanks for the wording. And to manage that, you need to be super careful in your way to manage your agenda. Meaning that I had some mentor also. In my organization, I asked to some of my mentor, how do you deal with it? And the main way to do it is like, for instance, let's dedicate a specific day in the week for a specific time zone. So you know that you need just to get in sync with people in China, for instance. So you will have to wake up earlier, to do call with them. But it means that don't continue your day up to with the US, because otherwise you will be exhausted. So I'm not following completely this pattern because we have built to organize, so we need to discuss a lot. And thankfully, with Teams, we have a lot of async communication, which is super helpful. So we are creating a lot of group chat on specific topics, and we are trying to avoid at all costs, like this famous video call when we all need to be in the same room. It's great to connect people. I guess we need to do that because, and I hope I will be able to see my team physically in the real world soon. But this is a way to manage it, and then find some time in your day to rest. So it's difficult because you're still thinking about like, I need to provide this document, but then I'm working, so I'm fortunate enough to have a house, and I know you have a beautiful place too, Vesa, so I can see that on social networks. And then I'm working outside because otherwise you can always be in your house and got the feeling that you're working full time. So it's really
like me.
Yeah. But you need to fight against yourself. In my case, I love what I'm doing. Like, if it would be a boring job, I guess it would be easier to say like, I'm not going to work like full time. I'm going to stop. In our case, we don't have the feeling to really work in a way. So we are really lucky. But our brain and our body could suffer from it. So you need to pay attention to that.
Yeah, that's actually really cool. So, and it's an interesting. So one of the things what I've thought about many times, especially when you're traveling the US and Redmond, it's a weird thing as you used to work a bit later as well. The evenings are for working time, so being productive, and there's meetings. When you're in Redmond, the evenings are silent. And it's a magical thing because the world kind of in the execution time zones, the world ends in PST.
Yeah.
So, and that means that the evening of PST is basically free. And I understand Hawaii is still forward on here. So the Momi, as an example, is in a bit different forward. But there's this kind of a 5 to 6 hours between 6 p.m. Pacific time before the China starts actually doing things. And you actually see that in email. You see that in the messaging actions and everything else. There is a gap within the 24-hour cycle because of the massive sea between US and Asia.
Yes, that's right. That's fun. And another way to manage also this remote work, and we have budget constraint now, but I was used, when I've been working in the Windows organization too before joining the developer division. And at that time, I was able to travel 4 times per year for 1 to 2 weeks. And this is something like people cannot even imagine. Like some stuff cannot be solved over email or virtual meetings for whatever reason, because we are human, I guess. Then we're super convenient sometimes to travel, and in 1 or 2 weeks we were super productive. Being in the same room, is something magical is happening. So maybe one day, thanks to the metaverse, we will manage to have the same level of productivity. Until then, we need to meet each other from time to time.
Yeah, I think you mentioned, or to me at least, like that means building trust, really building a relationship. It's so much easier to do in person when you are in person together for a period of time. Well, basically, you get to work, but then also have a dinner, share a drink, do something.
Exactly.
Like that makes it so much easier to bond as doing this.
Yep.
Like bonding on camera is so much more difficult, and it is not impossible. It just takes so much more time. And the weird thing is about it is that we're not wired, or at least I am not wired in a way that it has to be the deliberate action. Like you need to make the effort to meet.
Yeah.
Like if you are in the office, well, at some point you will need food. You will want to have lunch. So it's so much easier. It's like, hey, you're going for lunch, I'm going for lunch. How about we get together and just chat about stuff? Whereas now it has to be a meeting on the calendar, which is like, and then it's your evening, morning in the US. So like, do you bring beer or wine if you drink or not? Like, and then they bring milk or water. Like, how does that just doesn't work? And they bring breakfast and you dinner, like, and you don't want to eat in front of this, like it just doesn't work, right? So you have to have different approach about it, but it takes way more effort.
Yeah. Exactly.
Now, David, the one thing what I wanted to ask from historical things, let's not dwell too much on the historical things. We want to also focus on future. But how do you see Microsoft being changed within this 23 years you've been in Microsoft? And I do apologize. I need to refill my coffee because I know that this will take a while. I'm with the audio, and I'm going to go to our kitchen, and I'll be back. But please.
That is what I need to deal with every time. He just so I want to call, I meet you, but I will just go away to get my coffee.
So I ask you quantum computers are working, and then say, and then he leaves. Like, I'm not interested.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So let me ask you this, and then I'll walk away. Like, how you talk to? Well, that's what you get when you put somebody in a room for too long period of time by himself.
Here we go. I'm back.
Microsoft has changed a lot for sure. I started. Bill Gates was a CEO, yes, he was a CEO. Like it changed quite quickly to Steve Ballmer. Steve Ballmer was interesting because he wasn't a technical guy, and a lot of technical people didn't like him because of that, because he was a pure sales guy. But still, he managed to really push, the revenue of Microsoft and not the stock. I was supposed to become a millionaire when I joined Microsoft, so because millionaires were telling me that, and it didn't happen for whatever reason, but still, like, we are super fortunate to work for Microsoft. And then Steve Ballmer was a great leader still. I when I was in the same room as him, so first he had this very loud voice, strong voice. He was super energetic, developer.
Now it's Copilot.
But the company, like, it was all about like a vertical stack. When I was doing pre-sales, or evangelism, like I was pitching like .NET, ASP.NET, SQL, SharePoint, Internet Explorer on the top, Windows. It was like, if you go to Microsoft, you buy the full stack. And then we were challenged, by some Linux stacks like PHP. We were naming that LAMP, Linux, Apache, I can't remember. MySQL, PHP, and I started to be more interested into this weird world of open source communities. And this is really open source, and Satya basically has really changed the game, because when he started to take care of the cloud, initiative at Microsoft, it was much more open, meaning that we try also with the Windows Phone. I was there, where I was an evangelist of Windows Phone, trying to port some games from iOS and Android to using
really
Unity.
awesome.
Yeah, and I really love the Windows Phone, UX, but like the apps and the store, it was so difficult to compete with our competitors. And then really the switch was with between Steve Ballmer and Satya, and Satya was a really great leader, but has the right vision for Microsoft. And we have really seen that in the transformation of Microsoft regarding the direction, but also the way to structure some of the teams, asking us to collaborate more, because it was really like silos. I think we still need to have work to be done at Microsoft, but compared to where I'm coming from, the difference is huge, really huge. And open source at the beginning was just a specific org, only a specific group of people were allowed to work on open source.
Sure.
And this is where we started with a friend of mine. Maybe we'll talk about that, a 3D engine we've been building. We wanted to build that on our spare time, so we want it to be open source. And we were a little bit in trouble at that time because it wasn't the Microsoft today where I wouldn't say you are allowed to do whatever you like. You still have to be careful when you build open source at Microsoft. But at that time, open source was seen as completely evil, because you're going to kill Microsoft with your product. Come on, we are two engineers. If we're killing Microsoft,
But do not underestimate the power you have, right?
Yeah, maybe I should. So Microsoft had changed a lot, and we grow a lot regarding the number of employees. When I was working at Microsoft France, we were 700, so I was able to know most of the people, and then now it's really a huge company. It's very difficult to know everybody, and as I was an evangelist, a lot of people knew me because I was on stage, doing conferences for Microsoft. And then you probably have this issue, when you meet someone in the corridor, say, "Oh, David, how are you?" And you have no idea about who is this guy.
Sure. Yeah, hey, buddy.
So Microsoft, really great.
It's been a magical transformation, to be fair. And I've the classic stories about iPhones and all of that. And it was a real thing. If you actually use an iPhone, you could not get to the company emails or anything because it was seen such a competitor for Windows Phone.
Yeah.
And that was the Palmer time. And then all of a sudden we flipped the whole thing and we basically say, you choose whatever you choose, we'll be there.
It was an amazing transformation for sure. And much smarter to my point of view. I can understand when you need to protect your market sometime, but in this case, it was counterproductive and Satya, and then it was the opposite. My brother is a sales guy at Microsoft. He really enjoys Satya, but I know some sales people he's working with was we don't understand anymore this guy. It was easier to understand Steve Ballmer. He was a sales guy. So he was discussing sales to sales. And now we have someone more technical, but I think he still managed to communicate and discuss with everybody in the company. So
Sure. And the stock is looking really good actually this week especially. So
so sales guys should be happy.
Exactly. So, and I have to say, I'm a classic story, but I do have probably the most expensive bathroom and sauna department in Helsinki because I sold stocks to fund the renovation when the stocks were at $27.
Yeah. My brother told me that, you should look at all the stock you had since you started at Microsoft and what would be the amount if you would still have them today. And I don't want to do that now.
No. I don't want to see the money that I flushed down the toilet.
But it's in Microsoft, it's part of the compensation, obviously, for those who do not know that we're not getting paid only as a salary. We do get paid as the stocks as well, and then that trickles down gradually as part of your career. So it's part of the deal. So anyway, you actually mentioned there's something related on the open source and a small project which you started at some point, which has grown to be something pretty magical. What it is right now, because I think version 6 of Babylon.js was released this week. Can you talk about how did that happen? Why did you? Was that a weekend project, or in evenings I'll do some extra writing code? Or
the first thing though that I wanted to ask: did it start on Codeplex?
No, on directly on GitHub, I guess. Yes, we were.
It isn't that old, right?
It was. 2013. I'm not sure.
Yes.
I don't think it was Codeplex. Codeplex was David Catu is my best friend today. He started working at Microsoft. He was driving a company, and he's been writing 3D engine for ages, on Amiga and Atari. He was part of the demo scene. And I know you guys, in your Nordic country were the best one at that time building demos. So I always love developer coming from your countries. And I was part also a little bit of the demo scene, but I was more composing music on my side and writing a little bit of code. And immediately we are discussing. He said Silverlight 5 was the last version and had 3D support. And he just joined the company. And I was like, oh, I don't even have my Microsoft alias. I don't know what to do this weekend. I told him I'm going to give you the beta bit of Silverlight 5. And he started writing Babylon, but in C# on Silverlight. Obviously, Silverlight wasn't, as successful we were hoping. So, and then we switched to JavaScript. But to do that in JavaScript, we needed WebGL. And Internet Explorer didn't have WebGL. And it was tricky to release an open source engine just targeting Chrome or Firefox at that time. Trust me, yes. So
was there Chrome already then?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, Chrome was 2000.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So during we heard leaks. Sometimes we are discovering stuff from Microsoft thanks to leaks. IE is about to support WebGL, and my friend David told me I'm going to spend all the weekend coding to code it for Chrome. Crossing finger it will work for the next version of IE. So he's been building the engine. He showed me the engine was in one weekend you were able to do that. This is insane because and I told him I want to join the party, and we started
Copilot. He used
maybe he was traveling. He had a DeLorean and he's been traveling to the future. I'm interested into this GPT Copilot stuff. Give it to me. And then I started to help him on building some of the feature of the engine. So, thinking also about some additional tooling to help the developer. And really the vision, I told him it should be easy to be used by people stupid like me. Really, I was I'm not a huge 3D guru. And for me, 3D was about shaders, complex vocabulary. I felt I was, out of this game. It was too complex for me. So I want the people to really have the feeling that they can join the party too. So I will act as a monkey, meaning the way we're going to shape the APIs and the engine should be also powerful because we still need to compete with other people, but still easy to use. So this was what we did. And then we weren't invited, at web conferences because it was IE and Windows PC. Everybody wanted to see Mac on stage with Chrome. So as evangelists, it was super difficult. But they say but your baby project like this 3D stuff looks interesting. So you can go talking about your projects if you like, but don't do your Microsoft bullshit. We are not interested. And we were invited on stage, and we were the only one to have a Windows PC.
Not mention the M word.
Yeah. Exactly. $. And then we were on stage, and with IE and Windows, and everybody were making love of us. But at the same time, this product looks cool. And from time to time, we started to be identified by Ubisoft. Ubisoft one day said, we would like to use your engine. So we've been building an experience of Assassin's Creed in the browser. It was insane. This meeting was really, really impressive. And we managed to ship that. And one day when David went to the US, so he's now working in the US, some people started to contact us because they discovered that they wanted to use Babylon.js for Microsoft products, but they didn't know it was built by Microsoft employee. And so they started to use it, and now it's used in Teams. I don't know if you know that, but if I'm doing that, this is not the most impressive, stuff of, yes, exactly, of Teams, but it used Babylon.js.
Seriously?
Wow.
Cool.
Yes.
I didn't know.
But it's supposed to be a 3D engine, so it's used also on Bing Maps. It's used, because of the 3D, representation you have in SharePoint. So SharePoint Spaces. This is my last big contribution to Babylon was the VR support. So being used in SharePoint Spaces. I remember David told me the SharePoint people would like to discuss with you about your VR feature. And for me it was SharePoint. Yes, the stuff with documents.
SharePoint,
Yeah.
the capital S. Capital
For me, I won't be bad about SharePoint, but for me it was like more a boring product with document. Like I couldn't see the link with a VR environment, And it's a lot. They want to have a 3D, and I've been working with them.
Minority Report,
Exactly. And today we have a team of at least 15 people working for David, more or less, maintaining, because it's being used in many places at Microsoft. PowerPoint, when you have 3D models and you view PowerPoint online, it's used Babylon.js, for instance.
Wow.
So yeah, it's
insane, and all of that coming from a 2-person weekend project migrating from
learning open source, and we were hoping people could help us as open source, and open source, we discovered it was a nightmare. We were shipping code for free, and people were super aggressive, meaning like, oh, this doesn't work. Like, what doesn't work? What doesn't work? No, I don't know. You need to help me, like, build a repo. I don't have time to build a repo. And can you read the source code to help us? No, I don't have time to read the source code. And, I'm building a business on top of your shit. And like, and I was like, and this happened for like many months until, and we really started to lose faith in humanity with David. We said, like, we're going to build that just for ourselves, and we don't care about others. And then magically, some people started to help us in a progressive way. Some people said, like, I'm not good enough to contribute to the source code, but I like to help you to improve your documentation, to improve your samples, to manage some of your community. And we said, like, oh, yes, please, because we don't have time to answer to all messages. And we started to build tools to manage that, to have a forum. And then at the end, we had core contributors, people coming from, the 3D world that started to contribute. But the message I'm going to send to people, it takes a huge amount of time before reaching the magical point of having the open source project work.
It takes 5 years for overnight
success. Yes,
I guess this is the right time. Yeah.
And I love the fact that that's so classical thing for the open source stuff what we've been doing, and Waldek is well aware of this, where people, no, you need to help me. I'm building business on top of your shit. But it's like, no, but can you elaborate? No, you need to come to this call and help me. I don't have time for that.
Fix this. Well,
you need to fix that. I said, no, but you choose what exactly? You choose to
really version of responsibility. This is insane. Yeah. Interesting experience still. You have to test it to understand this magical world.
You will grow, if anything else. You will grow. You will grow thick skin. You will learn a lot. But it's
you learn a lot about human
and yourself,
humanity.
And yourself.
And yourself.
Yes. Isn't it like how you build grit in Finland?
Yes. Yes.
You just expose yourself to the worst experience possible, and you're like, I'm gonna get through this. I'm gonna just plow through it.
That's called sisu in Finnish. Now,
there you go. They have a word for that. It's a thing. In the rest of the world,
there is a
open source
word for that. Now, before we close up, and awesome discussion, and I love the historical points and of course the learnings related on open source and all of that. You coming back on what you do right now is that you're a principal product manager in the Microsoft Teams Toolkit. What would be what's like why Microsoft Teams Toolkit, and what would be the call to action related on that?
Well, the toolkit is really a tool to boost the productivity of people that want to build apps for Microsoft Teams. So for me, the way I see that, and the way I'm trying also to push for the future version, is to have kind of two paths. One would be a learning path, because the Teams platform is really rich, it's really interesting, but it's not always that easy to understand. When, for instance, I was coming from a web developer background, and not everything was obvious, how to integrate, my app into Teams. So the Teams Toolkit provide a lot of samples to show you, to try to inspire you in a way on where you could, put your application logic data and the various extensibility area. And the other one is using templates, this time to start from scratch with more or less opinionated also solution using React or Fluent or stuff like that. And then on top of this, IDE, like it's a developer tool, we have also additional tool to help you deploy your app in an easy way, register the app, because this is also something that could be complex for people starting from scratch. So we are trying to managing that. And the new version that we are going to ship for build, like it's already in pre-release state, the V5, we've been doing a huge amount of work to listen from you, from the community on what we need to improve. So far, a lot of people are really satisfied with that, because it's tricky sometimes to target beginners, but also people like are used to the platform and are looking for something else. So this is really the stuff we're trying to do, is to make the life of developer building for the Teams platform, but undoubtedly also, you can deploy in Outlook at Office.com, like using SharePoint also as an entry point, really making the life of people easy and to build quality apps, I hope, in Teams.
Yeah,
cool.
There is, I think, as part of the quarterly results, we were publicly saying that there's 300 million users in the Microsoft Teams. So it is a big audience for integrating your application into and making sure that people are aware of the applications, whatever you have. Of course, if you are a SaaS provider, whoever is listening this as an ISV, it doesn't mean that you need to rebuild your application. It's just surfacing your application in the right locations in Teams in the context of work, which is
and something I would like to add on top of that. We discussed a little bit about phones, like Windows Phone, iPhone, Android. We know how complex it was to deploy on all the stores. If you ship, on the Teams platform, and we're going to try to improve a lot the mobile developer experience. We still work to be done there. But let's imagine, like you said, there's a million of users, including the mobile platform. Like you could really have kind of an abstraction in a way store or a platform to distribute your app in an easy way. On the desktop, Mac, Linux, up to all mobiles, so.
Yeah, and also the fact that you bring your app where people already are. So they, like there's not like fiddling with bookmarks or policies to push link to folks, or like, how do I find this app? I know that we can book a travel, but where is this app? Like, what is its AKMS link at Microsoft internally, or where do I get it? Like, where's the catalog of our apps? Well, it's on Teams. You just have like an icon to press. That's it.
Yeah,
exactly.
So it makes it so much easier to find these apps that you actually need for work.
Yep, absolutely. Now, David, one more question. We typically do this with all of the people in the show. What's happening this week? Anything specific? What you're going to work on this week or next week? What's on top of mind for you right now? I guess it's builds, right?
Oh yeah, my day and nights are all about build. So we're going to have a lot of really cool stuff being featured at build that will use Microsoft Teams Toolkit. Something I can share publicly, like I will deliver a session on the Live Share SDK, which is something I really love. I invite people to have a look to what is the Live Share SDK, which is really something to help you building multiplayer experience in Teams using a backend provided for you to do socket connection. So I will deliver a session, and one of my demo was the metaverse demo. I was letting people to move into a 3D space in Teams. So I will explain how to do that, and also we are trying to deliver the last version of the Teams Toolkit. So at the same time, like working hard with engineering, trying to be ready, and also for you, because you're helping us to make it happen, because so it's really like working with a lot of different people. Coming back to the beginning of the meeting, which was like managing the time zone, people all over the world, being sure that you're not forgetting about sharing the right information, because sometimes it happens and then people are in trouble because they didn't know you wanted to go into this direction. So this is my next weeks up to end of May. And I will travel to Redmond for to be there. So I will see some physical people. Like it would be an amazing experience, like to be able real bodies.
And you will be
are
also
they actually
so
real
Bill,
or not?
you will be also expert on the booth, right? So if there's anybody who wants to talk to you about Live Share, SDK, Babylon, Teams Toolkit, you are there.
Sure.
Throughout the event, right?
Exactly, I will be there, and I know some of my friends from the Cloud Advocates will do a lab. I try to go there also to discuss with people. So if you are interested in the toolkit, yes, let's meet there. If you're fortunate enough to travel to build, I would love to meet you and Hear your pain or your joy.
That's good. And Build is, by the way, a hybrid setup. So those who cannot travel there, they can still watch the keynotes and the sessions and all of that remotely as well. But of course, there's some special in-person experiences there. Now, I guess that's it for this setup. Thank you, David. Really, really cool discussion. I wasn't aware of actually all of your historical things. I knew the Babylon.js, but it's cool to know a bit about the background. And I think looking back on history always helps us to define the future as well. So understanding the directions and where we're heading, it's actually that's I guess that's called experience, right? So we kind of can then start adjusting where we're heading in the future.
Thanks.
But cool. Thanks for joining. We'll jump on the show. We'll jump then covering the weekly articles with Waldek. But thank you, David, for this one. Really cool.
Thanks a lot for the invitation. See you soon.
Excellent. Thank you, David, one more time joining us. Really, really cool discussion and a bit of a historical recap on things as well. But I guess those are actually, they like we said during the interview, I think looking back on history is also giving us the direction for the future. And then we understand more about the things, what we're doing currently, why we're doing that, and where we're heading. So it's experience. So
yeah, no, that's also an interesting thing. Like the other day, I started to wonder, what is the age when you start looking back at your life? I used to do this. I used to listen to that. I used to play this game. I used to. When is that? Because as a kid, I didn't do that. Yeah. In my 20s, I don't think I did it too. So somewhere.
Your past 20s? What?
Yes. Exactly.
But somewhere along the lines, at some point, it starts.
Yeah, you start looking back at things. Yeah.
And again, anyway, it's the classic story of 40s as being the new 30s and 50s as being the new 40s and all of that stuff as well. Because at least personally, I don't feel that old. It's still like, well, we just graduated from high school.
A few hundred years back, that was kind of the lifespan. Like you would be 40, you would be almost dying.
True.
And now we're like, no. Like I still have years to go.
We're just getting started.
Healthcare, yeah, exactly. I am reinventing myself.
Yes, that is true. Anyway, and next show we're going to talk about the evolution of biology. So let's jump on the.
We will.
Let's jump on the weekly articles.
Might be absent on that show.
Yeah. Good. Let's jump on the weekly articles.
Yes.
So let me share my screen and I'll start with a Microsoft Teams blog. There's a good blog post related on what's new for security in Microsoft Teams. Basically, explaining what are the latest security considerations and features, what we are releasing in the Microsoft Teams. Pretty text-heavy blog post, but again, security is boring. No, just kidding. It's not boring. No, but it's actually, these are really good, referencing the latest articles and documentation and guidance on what has been released and how do we maximize or improve the security day to day within the teams. Now, this one is incredibly cool. So this is one of the biggest announcements, at least from my perspective, for a while, which is the unified domain for Microsoft 365 apps and services. That's pretty cool, isn't it?
It is pretty big. And the one thing I wonder that isn't clear in the article, will SharePoint have one domain in there too? Or will it still have this, like, you need to know the host name? Because that makes it really hard to navigate to. Like, to everything else, you can go just Outlook, Teams, To Do,
Teams,
whatever else.
Yep.
But then
I will not comment on that question for the time being.
It doesn't explain in the article, but yes. I've seen already a few folks ask about that in the open. So yes. SharePoint, yes. Will there be a landing place on it too?
Now that's an interesting, because it is like we can see from the picture, it's condoso.sharepoint.com always. So there's a personalization element for the company for the SharePoint Online, but that's not for Teams. That's not for other things as well. Now, SharePoint was one of the first offerings in Microsoft 365. So introducing this kind of a fundamental change in the URL is a bit tricky. However, it might be really
we're changing the URL
tempting,
anyway.
and it would be interesting that we would actually do this, because then people always know where to find the services. But I'm not going to go too much detail on the background things because I don't want to.
Still, it's a very interesting change. And the moment you look at the tag cloud we show now on the screen with all the different domains like Microsoft365.com, Teams.microsoft.com, Outlook.office.com, app.clipchamp.com, it makes perfect sense to consolidate all of that on one and have a consistent experience. And this is only for the authenticated apps in a way. So it's not for the internet site. It's not for the blog that we have at Microsoft, for the press site, news site, none of that. It's just for the apps.
Yep, absolutely. This is, whoever is driving this, yes, thank you. That is really, really cool. So consolidation and clarity is always good. Now, on the Microsoft 365 blog, we also had a cloud policy service at an ability to apply policies to everyone. Talks about the policy settings, which are for security and consolidation and labeling and all of that stuff. So basically, automation, governance, which is coming across the Microsoft 365. Cool. On the developer blog, we have an update related on Microsoft Graph SDKs.
Exactly. And it's a small change, albeit important one, right? So when we publish an SDK, and these are, so this is for the .NET SDK, we publish it to a NuGet feed, right? And we basically change, like in the past, we used to publish it as Microsoft_graph_client_and _and tooling org name, which is like, wait, what? So we changed that to Microsoft Graph so that it's easier for you to grow. It's like, this is Microsoft thing. This is a Microsoft Graph product in a way. So it's just meant for simplifying and, again, making it easier for everybody to understand that package is coming from us and exactly from who? Well, the Microsoft Graph team.
Yep. Absolutely. Really, really cool. Thank you, Maisa, for that blog post. There was also an update on the Teams Toolkit. As within the interview with David, Teams Toolkit is now heading into the V5 release. Now it's currently in public preview. We can pretty much guess when it's going to go GA because the build is coming pretty soon
on
and
Wednesday.
all of that. So on a Wednesday. But basically, there's going to be more and more guidance and information on what we can do and what are the integrations and capabilities within the Teams Toolkit. And this is one of those articles from Yi Dong talking about the different options and improvements, what do we introduce and how we make the development of Teams application easier and easier, which is really, really cool. And a lot of pictures. I actually love the fact that we do pictures. Even though I do like pictures. Pictures are nice.
I like pictures.
I like pictures. Pictures are good. So what have we learned from this PnP Weekly? Yes, I like pictures. Pictures are nice.
Pictures are good.
Pictures are good. Now, related on Teams Toolkit, Gary Trinder has been joining on us on the weekly community call on Tuesdays, 8 a.m. Pacific time, every single Tuesday, 8 a.m. Pacific time, except for summer and holiday season in the December. And he's been doing a series of how to do development for Microsoft Teams. There's 5 videos, and it's now completed. And we have the 5 videos published in a playlist. So this is basically a blog post from Gary talking about those 5 different videos, which are now available. Really, really cool that we have a baseline getting started video series available in the YouTube as well. Now, Sud Harrison K has a blog post related on SPFX custom left navigation for SharePoint Online. So basically, he is really one of the most active contributors in our open source areas, and also have been building so many cool things and helping people to build stuff in SPFX. So thank you, Sud Harrison, on all of that. And once again, a really great blog post talking about how could we do things and implement scenarios and with code examples, which is super cool. So thank you for that.
Big example, and that is for a custom nav on the left pane, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to zoom in. The picture is a bit small, but
top.
there's
go back to the header.
Oh, yes, it is. You are 100% correct. It is actually here. There we go. So really cool. Thank you, Sud Harrison, on that one. Now, Mikael had a blog post related on useful managed properties to use in Microsoft Search. What is a managed property? Putting on a spot.
So that basically, when you upload a document or have a list, like you can store the data about that item in a list, and actually you will store them in fields or in columns. And the way you search through them is through managed properties that are exposed on search. So these are mapped to crawled properties that are then mapped to fields. And the reason there is the mapping is that across the list, you might have things like a title in one, person's name on second, and then something else. And you can map them all three different fields to one managed property in search to make it easier for folks to search. And there's apparently a new set of managed properties that you can use to basically simplify and achieve more with search. So this is a great list, great overview of everything new that is now coming in search.
Yep, absolutely, really, really cool. Thank you, Mikael, for continuing sharing things. I'm actually watching this intro here that he joined Microsoft in 2019, and I'm just, geez, time flies because he just joined. No, it's 4 years ago. What?
Yeah, I am 2.5 years down, going on to third. So
what?
Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Mikael, for that one. And now Ganesh Sanap had a cool blog post. Actually, I like this blog post for a few reasons, but this is related on set a SharePoint site homepage using the PnP PowerShell and CLI for Microsoft 365. Because again, I like the fact that we provide that flexibility on depending on the tooling and command line tooling which you use. Depending on your preference, there are multiple ways of doing things. And here's how we do it in PnP PowerShell. Here's how to do it in CLI for Microsoft 365. So thank you for that one. Things are relatively simple, but we obviously, having this kind of blog post are basically really great
when
preferences.
You know how they work.
Yeah, exactly.
Simple, yes.
Yes,
like
precisely.
Everything else in life.
That is so true. That is so true. Now, Peter Wenstra had a new blog post related on lock and wipe devices using Microsoft Graph in Power Automate. That's actually really interesting. Why would you lock and wipe device?
Well, if you have a company phone or a phone with access to company assets and you lose it, you don't want that for somebody else to find and be able to access your company stuff, right? So you wipe it remotely. So there's like one common case. And maybe you want to do it at scale because maybe there is a reorg, maybe you decommission device and don't want to do them like one by one. So this is a very common case in IT where it comes to managing the devices.
Yep, absolutely. And this is a great reminder that Microsoft Graph is not just about the productivity endpoints and the information about the individual persons. It's also the accessing the information and capabilities and features within the company level, like managed devices. So that is the API to use in many cases. So really, really cool. Thank you, Peter, on that one. Now, 365 Message Center show had a new episode. I really like the show because, again, explaining the technical terminology in a understandable language is actually quite important for our customers and partners. And in Message Center show, they always cover the latest announcements what Microsoft has released in the Message Center, which is basically for tenant administrators to know what's rolling out. And most importantly, again, recapping SharePoint 2013 workflows is going to be retired. It's not going to be immediately taken away in April 2024, April 2024, from a year from now, for new tenants, that feature is no longer available. But if anybody is using that, it's going to be retiring 2026. So there's still plenty of time, but you need to start looking into is it being used, how it's being used, what do we do now related on the feature.
Before you know, we will be there, and you will be like, where did time go? Well, exactly. Exactly.
Christmas is only 8 months from now. We're past Christmas. There we go. Now,
that's an interesting way to get the bearings on the time of year.
Yes, exactly. So Juliana De Luca had a blog video related on how to synchronize Microsoft Loop task in a planner and Microsoft To Do. And this is really on replicating the task in the loop with automation to the planner and To Do. From loop to planner and To Do. That's actually a really nice scenario for sure. So
interesting. I didn't I didn't know. So am I understanding that correctly, that it's about getting the same set of tasks in the loop, in Planner, and To Do? Or
One second. Let's get back in here. So basically, as we have information in loop, we want to replicate information to other systems. And there's no native out-of-box things to do that. So we can actually just automate things across the systems. If you're using
will
To-Do.
need to look the video. I will need to watch the video to see how that's being done. That's intriguing, if anything else.
Yep, absolutely. So you have, by the way, a lot of tasks to do, Julian. No, just kidding. It's ideas and things, and we all use the To Do in a different ways. If you use To Do, whatever is the chosen program. Now,
owls, sending owls.
Yes, that's or pigeons. Paolo Pialorsi had a new video in his episode, BSS Tech Bites, episode 247, and this is about web part top actions. And let me actually a bit explain in the video what are web part top actions, and these are these in here, which we can now include in web part. So basically, rather than modifying, for example, the web part settings, you would have to open up the property pane and then do things. You can actually do adjustments directly in the top actions in the web part, which is cool. So simplification, making things more efficient. Out of the box, web parts are using those heavily. And then the last one from Shane. That's not a good pause picture. Okay, that's more bits better. So. Well, it is about building an animated Power Apps hamburger menu for easy data filtering. So basically, that's the hamburger menu, whatever we always call that, and how would we do that within the Power Apps? Which is really, really cool. Thank you, Shane, once again for the weekly video. What's happening for you this week? Or next week? This week, hopefully not
exactly.
too much.
So as you watch this, if all is well, if all went according to the plan, we released new version of Microsoft Graph Developer Proxy. We released new version of CLI for Microsoft 365. So we have some room to breathe around these two aspects too. But then we are off to another release already. So the room came and gone.
It's a content train with Gibson going a circle.
Exactly. So it's a really cool thing, right? Because there's no stress when it goes, oh no, we need to get this out. Well, if we don't ship this month, then in 30 days, there's another release. So
exactly.
Shrug. Unless it's a bug that we want to get as soon as we can, everything else is just we get it out when it's ready, and there will be always a release. So that makes it really, really cool. So these two things are out. What else is there? We are preparing for a thing that we will announce shortly. Other than that, being really cryptic there. Other than that, I think it's time slowly to start preparing for ECS, which is the European Collaboration Summit. Preparing presentations, preparing demos, because it's only less than a month away now. So, after waiting for a long, long, long time, I finally booked my trip. So that is already a milestone achieved, but now it's really time to prep for these talks. So that will be probably the next few weeks doing that. How about you? Other than you being in Vegas?
Right now, being in Vegas, which is it's always nice to see people, but it's the additional stress and all of that for traveling and everything else, and losing weekends, important because of the travel and setting up things is a bit of a bummer, because it has an impact on family, and you don't get to spend the free time with the family. But it's really, really cool to see people physically, and being in the room with the energy with other people has a positive impact for sure. So it's an interesting, dual. It's at least in a personal level. I actually it's a two-headed sword. So you want to be there, but then when you start traveling, it's not necessarily nice, but when you're present, it's okay. But then it's super complicated. So
I want to be there and see people without everything else around it.
Yes, exactly.
The hassle of packing, traveling, jet lag, sitting in an aluminum body of a plane for 9 hours, layovers. No, not interested in that. I just want to be there, meet people, have a great time, talk, chat, share a drink, whatever people do.
Yep.
And then be home. And then everything else around it is like, no.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a big Formula One fan, and I love the Kimi Räikkönen mentality. Historically, things I've read a few books about his storylines as well, and it's always been like he really loved driving. Anything else is like, I really don't care.
Yeah, and F1 is really political, and there's a lot,
exactly.
especially around like renewing contracts and who will get the seat, and everything else around. Like you're being a driver, and then there's the whole marketing and promotion, and you need to do this, and there is sponsor deal, and you need to appear at events and do this and shoots, and it's like, can I just drive? Like, exactly. If only.
Can we just focus on relevant things, not on this nonsense?
Speaking of which, so since we airing this on Tuesday, who won the race? Max?
That's a good question. Now we're making predictions for Baku. Those who are not Formula One fans are like, what the fuck? What are they discussing? But there's in Azerbaijan, there's a race on Saturday and Sunday, because there's the sprint race on Saturday, and then there's the actual race on Sunday. I would say Max will win on Sunday, so unless there's any technical problems.
Unless the car breaks, but yeah.
Exactly. So that's pretty much the case for this year, unfortunately. So it would be nice that there would be a bit more competition, or maybe Mercedes.
7 years of dominance of the silver arrow.
That's true.
So
that is true. Maybe George will be doing a surprise,
P3?
And Mercedes is back. So
P3, P2, P3.
No. Maybe George will actually win. You never know. So
really.
Maybe Mercedes is finally back in the game. So we'll see.
Okay.
Predictions. Interesting to see how this plans off. Anyway, thank you for watching, listening, and thank you, David, one more time on joining on the call. Really cool discussion. Bit of a recap on history and all of that. That's always good for sure. And also about the future, where we're heading within the Microsoft and with the community. And I love the references related on open source and community stuff, because they're so relatable. we started our GitHub. No, we started actually our community stuff in open source back in 2013 in Codeplex, and then moved to GitHub in 2014. And it's a lot of you will grow a thick skin for sure.
On our end, I don't know. So I don't get exposed to every nitty-gritty detail across everything that we do, because we do a lot. But overall, I can say that we've been. It's like community has been pretty good to us.
Yep, absolutely, 100%. And there's always multiple opinions. There's always feedback and all of that. But and we're all entitled to feedback. That 100%. And feedback and perceptions are highly subjective. So whenever something new comes around, or some people do things, there are reactions, and that's part of the risk, which we talked about this one with, who did we talk about this one? For example, publishing videos and everything else. There's always a risk that people will come and say,
Agnes, what was it to Agnes? Yeah.
No, with April, we talked about the trolls and the feedback and everything else. And whenever you put yourself available with open source communities and everything else, you open yourself also for the.
Well, but for every one person that hates, there's hundreds who don't and appreciate that. And like, if that's, if you choose to spend your energy in a way to hate folks and their work, well, that's really shame for you, and it's sad for the person, but nothing we can do about it.
That is true.
On that, I don't know, can we call it a positive note?
But constructive or encouraging note, at least.
Yes, encouraging. Don't get yourself bogged down and brought down by others who don't believe in you.
Yes, exactly. That's a good ending. Thanks everybody for watching, listening. We'll be back within a week. Cheers.
Bye-bye.